pause before we go full blast. But can you hear me now? Perfect. Right, so let's get cracking then, because I really like to be wrapped up by 9 p.m. today. So this is definitely short and sweet and kind of easily actionable. So what are we here to talk about? Well, New Year's resolutions for your e-commerce business. For those of you who've not come across me before, I'm Christina Jones, and most of you probably know me better from within the horse industry. I run a digital marketing agency called Black Type Digital, and then I, I know some of the people who are on today are some wholesale customers, but I've been involved in e-commerce actually for longer than I have with kind of doing pure digital marketing. So our first site started in 2001, and boy has there been some changes over the sort of pretty much well now 15 years in the e-commerce world, and I love digital marketing, but if I had to choose any one part of it, it would be e-commerce because for me it's a massive challenge. Not a particularly easy business to be in, especially right now. Lots and lots of sort of different threats, but equally massive opportunity. The stats are showing that it is still, there's going to be massive growth in the kind of switch from high street sort of shopping in bricks and mortar to online. So there's still, we've seen a huge boost sort of over the last decade, but there's still a lot to come, especially in America. Parts of Europe, I was surprised. Spain is very, very behind in e-commerce at the moment. And yeah, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is the sort of three, to me, New Year's resolutions. What I'm hoping is that by 9 p.m. you can written down on a bit of notepaper three things that you should be able to do pretty much over this weekend. So that's the goal. So let's kind of dive straight into it, really. Oh, actually, before I do, I've just forgotten as well that if you best place to find me in regards to e-commerce specific information at the moment is a brand new Facebook profile. Sorry, Facebook page I've got set up, which is there, facebook.com, Christina Jones Online. Because as normal, my own website is at the back of the queue behind clients on, so there will be a new e-commerce focused website, but that is slightly later on in January. So stalk me on Facebook in the meantime. So, what are we going to kick off with? Well, first of all, if any of you have been on my webinars before, you know I'm never particularly serious with slides. So the biggest mistake, um, and I'm going to tell you rather than watch the train wreck, but this is honestly the thing I find scariest with my digital marketing agency head on when I go into work with new e-commerce clients. And to do that, there's kind of a massive amount of preparation work you do before kicking off. And it's normally, I kind of sit down and we start talking about numbers. Now I know Denise is on the call, and she is very much, she's the numbers queen, not me. I have, for someone who spends sort of 80% of her working life using spreadsheets, they're not necessarily my number one thing. I'm probably like a lot of business owners who are a little bit, um, it's not our favorite thing to be doing. So, and you can bring the pros, you've got bookkeepers, you've got accountants, but you really need to know the fundamental numbers behind your business. But again, I'm not actually going to talk about those today because long-term business planning is a lot to fit into an hour. And if you're interested, I'd really suggest you stay on for the second webinar where we're going to talk in a bit more detail about that with Denise and Emma. But the kind of beauty and danger of e-commerce is that it's now a 365-day-a-year business. So there's no real let-up. And you can be incredibly, you can get in trouble very quickly because of that. If you're using paid traffic, things like Google AdWords, Facebook adverts, you can be racking up big bills quite quickly, and it's really important that you've got a handle on it. Now, again, I promise that this wouldn't be too scary. So what I'm going to say is I've got it down to a fine art that I can handle this over a cup of coffee in the morning. So if you know me in real life, you'll know I'm a complete coffee addict, and there are coffee machines pretty much within arm's reach in the office, at home, and in the tack room up at the stables where my horses are. but so I've got it set up so that over a cup of coffee every morning, no matter where I'm in the world, whether I'm on holiday or whether I'm working, I review a very small amount of key numbers to do with each e-commerce website. Now, most of you will be sensible and only have one, so it'll make it even easier. I've got it set up that these come through as an automatic report from Google Analytics. So I don't have to open up anything apart from my email, which means that it's easy enough to access off a phone, your iPad. You've not even got to drag open a laptop. So if you are on holiday, taking a day off, etc., you can do it. So what are the numbers that I'm suggesting you look at? And just before I hit the slide, I'm going to gulp my cup of coffee now. So for me, these are the big three to monitor daily. Now, before I talk about a little bit more detail about each of them, why am I looking at them daily? Well, first of all, it is a safety check. As I've already alluded to, you might be running a fair amount of paid traffic to your website. If there's a problem, you're not necessarily going to know about it. Um, if you've got your website has crashed, which is every e-commerce store owner's worst nightmare, then there are various services you can use that's like website uptime monitoring. So it's not specific to e-commerce websites, but if a website goes down because the server it's hosted on has fallen over for whatever reason, it will notify you very quickly. Now, what can happen, and is far more common in my experience, is that rather than a website going down, there'll be some sort of error on it. And so there might be something that's stopping people checking out, and it's not even necessarily everyone. And the majority of people, if you've been on any sort of previous webinars where I've talked about e-commerce conversion rates, um, you, you're getting a lot of people are visiting your website and not buying anyway, even when things are running perfectly. So the reason why I look at these numbers is to, first of all, make sure no problems. So sort of firefighting. And then the more positive reason is because I like to keep a really close handle on what's going on in the business on a very sort of top line level. So the three numbers that I'm looking at that come through in my Google Analytics report is my daily sales. So whichever currency you like. I'm going slightly currency mad here this evening, but I just want to know what my top line sales are. I've got for this year a very detailed financial plan for each of my e-commerce websites, and so I know for each month what the kind of overall sales I want to be achieving. But I've then broken that down to, so for January, there's a sort of a daily sales threshold. Now, we're talking here real life business. So, I am an e-commerce business owner, as you guys are, and I'm not going to come at this from a theoretical angle. There are fluctuations in this, but if I had a couple of days where I was, way below my target for the month, it would straight away be, what's going on. One day's a blip, 2 days okay, day three, I'm like, right, this needs sorting. Your month is, 30, 31 days. So, that's why having the sort of daily focus to me is important. So the next thing, so daily sales, my second figure that I want in there is my conversion rate percentage. Now this, to me, is almost one of the most important numbers in an e-commerce business, and it's normally the one people have absolutely no idea about. People are normally pretty good on their sales and good on their third one, number of orders, because they know how many things they're having to pack and how many things are going out of the warehouse every day. But when I say to them, what's the conversion rate on their website, they look at me a little bit blankly. So if anyone's feeling totally honest, I'm not going to ask you for the number, but can you just put in yes or no, whether if we were sat face to face over a cup of coffee right now, you could tell me what your average conversion rate percentage is. And what I mean by that is for every 100 people who visited your website, how many of them were completing a sale through your checkout? It's a little bit of homework for you. Check you're awake. So type yes if you know it, absolutely, and no if you're not sure or only got a vague idea. Okay, Kirsten, well, that's a good, honest answer. So Sam, no. So and Corinne, because I have two websites, a website and an online store on another site. Okay. Um, for those of you who are saying no, do you have Google Analytics installed on your websites? Okay, great. Well, it's a simple thing to fix. So you may well already, if you go into Google Analytics and go down to the e-commerce section, it's there underneath your goals section on Google Analytics. There will be a whole section dedicated to e-commerce. Depending on how your website was configured in the first place when the Google Analytics were put on. But the kind of the down and dirty, even if you've not got Google Analytics, is if you know how many people have visited your website yesterday, if 100 people visited your website and you had one order, then your conversion rate is 1%. Now, within the world of e-commerce, it's generally low. If you're getting between 1 and 2%, you're sort of an industry average. If you're inching up towards the 3, the 4, the 5%, you're doing really, really well. But and again, conversion rate percentage as it sort of fluctuates daily can be. It's one of those things that, to be honest, as an average overlooking, is it improving or not, because it will massively fluctuate unless you've got a site with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 orders a day. Statistically, you can have the number of orders that are placed versus the traffic can make this kind of bounce around quite a lot. But the reason why I monitor it on a daily basis is because it is a good indicator, again, of problems. So if I know that my average conversion rate on a website is 3%, and 2 days in a row I'm seeing that it's dropped down to 0.6%, then I'm going to go in and dig around. And this really saved the bacon in the Christmas season in the last quarter, so 2015, where on a particular website, there was nothing reported by any customers as there being any problems, and there was nothing, but we saw the conversion rate suddenly dropped, and it's a site that had been very consistent. And I kind of knew that it happening more than 2 days in a row there was something going on. It's not a fluke when it's happening 3 days in a row. And luckily on that particular website, I use a bit of software called Hotjar. So I'm just going to type in. I said again, I don't want to go too techy, but I do want to point you in the direction of some tools if they're of interest. And Hotjar allows live site recording. And so what it meant that I could do was go back and look at real life user sessions. So people using my site over the previous couple of days. And it flagged up that there was a really simple error that was enough. So it wasn't actually technically a site error in terms of stopping people checking out. But what it was some variance in the prices that were being displayed, which is enough to put customers off. You can remember customers on e-commerce websites are quite shy creatures. They're a little bit like a herd of antelopes out on an African plain. It doesn't take much to put them off and make them gallop away from your checkout at high speed. So for me there, monitoring my conversion rate percentage allowed me to pick up a problem very, very quickly, and especially at such a crucial time of year. My conversion rate as an overall trend, I would look, that's something that every quarter, so every 90 days, I'm looking at it over the sort of previous 90-day averages, and I'm always trying to improve my conversion rates, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then my third sort of stat that's coming through is the number of orders. And this is again because the daily sales one can fluctuate a lot by, you might have some unusually big orders that day that make, which is great. So, that's a good day in e-commerce land, but it can push your daily sales up high. And realistically, in some ways, the number of orders you have is sometimes a better metric to track in terms of the sort of the rhythm of your business day to day. And again, I like to know that we talked about having annual sales targets which break down to monthly and then daily, and then I know what my average order rate is. It's not something I monitor on a daily basis. That's something a whole sort of in my monthly and my quarterly tracking. But then it breaks down to the number of orders. And all these things are, very quick to look at. So it's taken, kind of 10 minutes to tell you about them, but to literally have them come through on a report, it is sort of 2 or 3 minutes. Just quickly have a look at them. And at that point, if anything looks, particularly good or particularly bad, at that point I would pull up, the websites themselves, Google Analytics, and dig around. I put traffic in brackets as this is one of those things that I, I have it on the reports, but I'm not as concerned about traffic as I am about actual sales because I prefer money going through my checkouts to just visitors. Why traffic can be useful is identifying spikes. So again, we had you've actually had some really some great media coverage in the last quarter. Some of it which we knew about, things like we had some products that were featured on the Apprentice TV show. Some of the things the candidates were selling, and I knew about that 48 hours in advance. We've had other things where we've had major magazines and bloggers feature products and not notify us, which is to me it's actually surprising they don't tell us, because it makes me more likely to want to advertise with them. But the first thing you notice is perhaps that you've had an unusually high spike in traffic that day. So again, there's things that would make me go and have a look in my analytics and see, okay, so I've had twice as many people, where are they coming from? Um, Sometimes your traffic can be up, but it doesn't necessarily relate to orders. You can have things featured in websites like BuzzSumo, sorry, not BuzzSumo, BuzzFeed, and you can send an awful lot of traffic, but they're not necessarily buyers. So again, it all comes back to my number one figure here, which is it being all about daily sales, because to me, ultimately, that's the metric that e-commerce businesses sort of live or die on. So that's everything really about numbers that I want to talk about today. Before I move on to the next point, has anyone got any questions? Or you're all just completely numbered out? So what number? Oh, well, I'm just thinking about the three numbers in general that I think you should be monitoring, Kirsten. So your daily sales, the conversion rate percentage on your website, and the total number of orders. Again, sometimes people aren't sure where to find this information. It depends on your particular e-commerce sort of setup that you've got. Most websites themselves will have some sort of dashboard, so things like Shopify, Magento, WordPress, for things like WooCommerce, that are areas where it will kind of pull this data. I tend to use Google Analytics because I can get it to email me nice reports, and it's sort of software agnostic, so it doesn't matter what the websites are on. I can just kind of go in and look, and it's far quicker for multiple websites for my own clients to kind of look at everything in one place. So Kirsten's next question. What happens if I don't get sales every day? Obviously, that days would be a 0% conversion, but should I take from a whole month or something? I would still look at this every day, because it becomes very it's very easy when you've had a day of perhaps no sales that you then, day can slip into 2 days, can slip into a week, etc. And if you've got your sales goals, and that might literally be to kind of start off with, you're not necessarily firing out the gate like Amazon, that your goal is to consistently, say for the whole of January, hit one sale a day. And then you step into February and you say, right, we're going to now try and take that up to 2 sales a day, or average over, 10 per week. I would monitor these because it gets you into a really good habit of doing it, ready for when you're getting a lot more sales. And it really helps focus the mind. We're already sort of, we're over a week into January, and it's so easy to let things slide in business. So that's another thing for me. A big to me, I'd credit a big part of the success from last year, from seeing real growth in the e-commerce businesses, came from getting a lot more focused on doing this stuff actually, rather than playing around with all the digital marketing, which is what I'd far prefer to do than looking at Excel spreadsheets, to be honest. But then you do need to look at it within the sort of context of, I wouldn't make any decisions necessarily. I'm using this for monitoring. I then look at my conversion rate percentage, my sales, etc., over months and 90-day periods to sort of compare and contrast. But this is really for monitoring and daily discipline, to be honest. Great. So if no one's got any more questions, I'm going to move on to my sort of next New Year's resolution, which is an excuse to feature my favourite TV character. So do we have any other Suits fans in the house this evening? Were you all wondering who this random bloke is that I've just put up on screen? Kirsten saying she doesn't watch, but to hear it's really good. Yeah, I don't have a TV at home, and there's very, very few programs that I watch online on catch up, but Suits is one of them. And for those of you who've never seen it, Harvey Specter is one of the toughest negotiators in the business. So he is a fictional character in a New York law firm. And it is time for everyone to do something which makes most people feel quite uncomfortable, and is negotiating over the two biggest expenses you've had in your business. So we've talked a little bit about monitoring sales. And a lot of the focus about e-commerce business sort of marketing is always about growing your business, getting loads more customers, etc., etc., etc. And that's all well and good, but you can sometimes make more profit for doing less work, which I'm quite a fan of personally. And the two big expenses for any e-commerce business in general are, well, certainly they're fixed expenses that as your business grows, these grow pretty much in line with it, is your credit card percentage, so the kind of card merchant percentages, and also your shipping. Now, both of these are massively negotiable. So if I move on, uh, we'll apologise in advance to the foreigners on the call, because this is PayPal UK rates. But for once, I'm gonna sort of fly the flag for the Brits, because when you work in digital marketing, you get really frustrated that the Americans get all the cool stuff first. So a really, really simple thing for you to do, if any of you use PayPal in your business, is just log in and check that you are on the most preferential rates there. So they will not automatically move you onto the discounted rates as your sales grow. So this is, for those of you, if you can't quite read this, your monthly sales, so the absolutely standard sort of PayPal merchant processing rates. It starts off at 3.4% plus 20 pence. If you get your sales up to £1,500 a month, so that's about $2,000, that drops down to 2.9%. So you're straight away, for every single sale that goes through your online store, you're making an extra 0.5% profit. Now, 0.5% is not, it's not the biggest number in the world, but for for something that will take you 5 minutes to do, this can save you a lot of money over the year. And this is an example here from PayPal, and you can see as your sales build, it drops right down. But this applies to pretty much every credit card processor on the planet. So what's everyone using, just out of interest? I would imagine there's a lot of people with PayPal. What about things like Stripe? You got any Stripe users? Okay, brilliant. So we've got a bit of a mix. And then as well as PayPal and Stripe, we've got Shopify Payment Gateway, which is actually handled by Stripe. Karine. It's just that it's sort of badged up as Shopify. And then you've got loads. You've got, I'll be here all night, but WorldPay, Sage, Streamline, the ones that are sort of more associated with the banks. This is where sometimes it becomes a bit of a decision as well, because things that when we were going back to our sort of first point we were talking about today, and things like conversion rates, something that can increase conversion rates on sites is offering multiple payment options. So for me, I'm a massive fan of Shopify, as many of you know. I like Shopify payments. It works very well. It's very friendly, especially when people are shopping off mobile, and easy to use. But that's something that, as a strategic decision, if you've got, so we take our PayPal example, and you've got 15, we'll say let's make it £16,000 a month running through your e-commerce site. If you were purely using PayPal, that would entitle you to a rate of 1.9%. Whereas if you're splitting between Shopify payments or Stripe and PayPal, you're sending £8,000, say, through each. And so it's all these little kind of balances and checks. Generally, multiple payment options increase conversion. But it's a simple thing to do for all of you that use PayPal. If you've not logged in and checked what your rate is, I would suggest pour yourself a cup of coffee, log in and check, and you can make some potentially some sort of big savings on your credit card rates. Now, when it comes to people at PayPal, they are totally transparent with their bans. So going back to my previous slide of Harvey Spec, if you're using someone like WorldPay, Streamline, and some of the the American, the kind of traditional bank-led merchant processors, you will have to get on the phone and negotiate hard with them. So I'm definitely not the world expert in negotiating, but it is worth having a nag. They are seeing massive competition from the new people around, like Stripe, and you will see there that that there is some room to save yourself some money. PayPal, super simple. The others you might have to get on the phone and kind of have a little bit of a rant for a couple of minutes, but again, it's kind of easy money. So then leading on to the second thing, so simple tweaks to increase profits, shipping. So shipping is such a minefield. Who here hates having to deal with the shipping side of their e-commerce business? Yeah, me too, Kirsten. Now, shipping is again exactly the same as the credit card companies. It is a volume-led business. The more you send, generally, the better the rates, and that applies right across. We've got here, DHL, FedEx, UPS. They would be familiar with, people from the US, the UK, Europe. They, kind of global couriers. And then we've got people at P&O, which is sea freight if you're importing anything from China, Far East in general for yourself, and then the guys that move goods on pallets. Now, this is something where, again, it's a big topic to cover off tonight. But when you're sort of planning what you're doing with your business, sometimes it can be worth really going for aggressive growth in sales and taking a short-term hit in profitability, because you know that straight away it will save you. You will make a lot more money off the discounts you get on your shipping. So for the Brits that are on the call tonight, I'm going to talk very briefly about Royal Mail. So, which is the British equivalent of the United States Postal Service. So it is the where you can mail anything from a letter up to parcels, a very sort of generic postal service. Now there are quite a few different options, and that's partly what makes it complicated. So unfortunately, you've got to spend a bit of time Googling on this one. But there are rates within Royal Mail, so you can go to the post office like a member of the public and pay. The kind of next level of discount is using franking machines. And then the sort of third level is you then get a Royal Mail online business account, which is called an OBA account. Now, these are great for several reasons. First of all, you get very, very competitive shipping rates. So when we switched around here and went on to a Royal Mail OBA account, I straight away that year made £1,000 more profit, even if I didn't sell a penny more than the year before, just from more competitive shipping rates. Now, I quite like earning £1,000 for doing not very much, so that was a bonus. And you've also got 30-day credit terms, which can be really useful in a fast-growing business, especially on the, again, kind of Christmas season. So we're January, and I'm already talking about Christmas 2016, where you've perhaps got a lot of cash flow tied up in inventory. Being able to pay your shipping on 30-day terms is great. So on all of these, it requires a fair bit of haggling, negotiating, and finding out what's out there. This is where I find it really useful to spend time in forums with other e-commerce business owners, because the chances are there's someone out there with a very similar business to yours, and this can massively it kind of varies on what you're selling, with perhaps something like jewelry, where everything tends to go as kind of letters, versus people selling selling things like saddles or big sculptures all around the world. So every single business has got almost needs its own sort of unique shipping solution. That's the bad news. But the good news is that negotiation can save you a lot of money. So, my kind of points here, if you go and look at your credit card processing and your shipping rates and haggle, the chances are you can make more profit in 2016 than you did in 2015, even if you don't sell a penny more stock. Now, we're hoping that that's not quite the case and you're going to sell loads more this year than you did last year. But before I move on to the sort of final point of this evening, has anyone got any questions about shipping, and kind of I'm imagining what your biggest kind of hatred is with shipping? What's your number one problem? So, Karine, OBA account, so it's an online business account, which is available for royalmail.com, which is it's a British postal service, and there are the equivalents available amongst the different sort of international post services. So if you're a British-based e-commerce business owner tuning in, or actually you don't necessarily have to be in Britain, you could have stock based in the UK warehouse for fulfillment. The Royal Mail OBA is awesome. And I am on a bit of a mission to find out more as I'm researching entering the US e-commerce market. So by the end of this quarter, I will know a lot more about American shipping options as well. Okay, brilliant. So I want to sort of move on to our kind of final point of the evening, which is about mindset. So, for those of you who know me in real life, you'll know that I am definitely not a sort of woo-woo person. So I don't have a kind of vision board covered in glitter and fairy dust in the corner of my office. But I am lucky enough to spend a lot of time in my digital marketing agency working with top athletes, and I know that mindset is crucial. And I'm not really going to go, though, into massive depths about it, but in as much as the one thing that I think is crucial in terms of mindset for e-commerce business owners, more than sort of business owners in general, is to have a really, really open sort of ethos to testing within your business. So I've got here, which is a very classic quote of Thomas Edison, who was the gentleman who invented the electric light bulb after thousands upon thousands of failures. I think more recently we've got Elon Musk, who was one of the founders of PayPal, and is now revolutionizing the space industry, as well as developing Tesla cars. And if any of you have read his latest, his official biography, which is an amazing book, you'll see that within the space company they have failed so much. So what am I talking about in terms of sort of failing? Well, rather than talking about failing in a negative way, I want to talk about experimenting. And this is something you really need to be embracing in your e-commerce business. So before I dive in and read off to you my sort of list of ideas of things you should be experimenting with, I'd love to know if anyone's got anything sort of new that they want to try out already down on their 2016 New Year's resolutions for their business. So Dolores saying, I think it's good to be clear with what you want. Absolutely. And I think that is it very much relates back to our kind of first points about knowing your numbers. But to me, the sometimes the disconnect you get is where people are um, sort of praying for sales rather than actually going out to try different things. So if you've not had any, if you're not hitting the numbers that you want to, um, and kind of the days and potentially the weeks are going by, if you carry on doing the same thing, the chances are it's not suddenly going to send you loads and loads of sales. Um, yeah, I do agree with you, Dolores. So if you don't know what you want to start, and Kirsten, and we've got some time for Q&A at the end, and I'm happy to help you get a bit more specific on that. So I think your business is a really interesting one. So things that I think people should be experimenting with in 2016 is first of all, you should be experimenting with some of the things we've already talked about. So if you at the moment only have one payment processor on your website, if you're only using PayPal, then you can perhaps try adding a second one, whether that be Amazon Payments, whether that be Stripe. If you're using Shopify, then Shopify Payments is a really simple one to set up, and try it. And all of this is literally, it's a case of just test, measure, test again. And when to me, it's actually really is a relief that one of the things that I'm obsessed with is continual education, and I don't think some of my team here were best impressed that they got their part of their Christmas bonus was getting put through a massive new certification program that's just been launched. But when you speak to some of the people who are the very best in the world at Facebook ads, and they turn around and say that even when you are literally world class at this, you should only expect a 10 to 20% hit rate. So only 10 to 20% of your ads will break even or make a profit. You realize how important it is to continually be testing. So some things that I would suggest you pop on your lists are retargeting advertising. So again, things that we're talking about there is stalking people around the web who've already visited your website. So if you're not doing retargeting in your e-commerce business, you are leaving a large percentage of possible sales there. I'm going to do some training specifically about retargeting, so I won't really cover more about it than that to say it should be on your New Year's resolutions list if it isn't there already. Second thing I've got down are Pinterest adverts. Is anyone here using Pinterest adverts at the moment? It's not available yet in the UK, but they've announced they launched this quarter. But I know you can at the moment in America, Canada, Australia. So is anyone using Pinterest ads? So, okay, brilliant. So Kirsten says a little bit. Karina, I didn't even know about it. No, Pinterest at the moment as a social network, even organically. So a visitor from Pinterest is statistically far more likely to place an order on an e-commerce sites versus people coming through from places like Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram. And I think that's very much to do with the sort of nature that Pinterest people are. They're spending a lot of time pinning things that they're either intending to purchase or looking for inspiration, certainly in the home decor. Kirsten, as especially with your business, because it's so set up around which I'm going to tread into a little bit on Emma's territory here. People, there's are very loyal traditionally to brands and tend to buy very consistently. But when they are pregnant, it's a huge opportunity for marketers because people change their buying sort of powers massively so. And I think it's the time where people are they're planning. It's a long lead. Well, it's definitely a long lead in because it's 9 month period between kind of pregnancy starting and birth. So people are very much planning. This is exactly the same for anyone in the wedding industry. But for those of you who are, you just have even more practical things, I use Pinterest a lot for pinning things I'm planning to buy. There's a lot with things like cocktail recipes, etc. And it's people in a real sort of product-based mood. So if you're not doing Pinterest at all, that should be high up your sort of New Year's resolutions. And Pinterest ads are really, really effective. And I would definitely test them out in your business. They are not right for every single business, and it's always difficult giving sort of general advice. I feel like I am like one of those doctors on the radio who has to give some sort of disclaimer. But I would suggest that I always have a test budget. So I've got my marketing sort of plan, and then there is a sort of experimenting pot to try new things out. Um, so the other thing then that's sort of similar to Pinterest ads, we've also got Instagram adverts. So these rolled out just before Christmas. They were previously only available to very large brands while they were in test mode. You can place your Instagram ads through the same dashboard as you manage your Facebook adverts now, because Facebook owns Instagram. So they're a simple one to set up, and again might be massively effective for your company. And it's difficult to know until you've tested them. So they're a nice one to try. My fourth one is something I'll put my hands up and say I've not tested yet, and is not a platform I'm massively familiar with. It's actually in my diary on Monday morning to have some lessons on this from the younger members of my team. I'm talking about Snapchat. Does anyone here use Snapchat in their business? Or actually, or personally? So Dolores, yeah, my son does though. Yeah, I was really surprised about Snapchat because my perception about it was that it was for teenagers who didn't want their parents to know what they're up to, and perhaps people who were having slightly illicit relationships. Because if you're not familiar with Snapchat, it's a messaging app that when you send a photo with sort of annotations through the app, and once someone's viewed it, it then disappears. So it's a sort of interesting one, and they are. It's been around quite a long time, since 2011, but it's suddenly getting real traction. So Kirsten saying amongst big lifestyle bloggers, very much so. Some of also the sort of mainstream media are focusing a lot on Snapchat. And the interesting thing is at the moment, the CES conference on in Vegas, which is a big sort of mobile and communications sort of tech conference, and at that their Snapchat announced that they are rolling out an advertising platform in 2016. So it's on my New Year's resolutions to find out a lot more about Snapchat, and ask me in 30 days when I've spent a lot more time learning about it and trying it out. But it's definitely worth, even if you don't want to dive into it straight away with your business. And I'm always cautious about giving people too many things to be kind of shiny objects to be splitting their time and attention. But I would, if you don't want to dive into it in a big way, and it might be too soon. But as a couple of ladies have mentioned in the chat, there's a lot of lifestyle bloggers jumping on. I'd perhaps download it, start keeping an eye on what people are doing, and have it on the sort of thing where perhaps look again in sort of March, April, what's happening on Snapchat, certainly on the advertising side. So those are my sort of like kind of sort of social media and ad things to experiment with. And on a sort of wider tool, for those of you who I've spoken to about Facebook ads, you know that I am a massive proponent of testing hard. And that even a simple newsfeed ad normally has anywhere from 24 to 96 variations of it running, different headlines, different pictures, slightly different targeting, etc. But with it specifically to e-commerce businesses, there are some more practical things that you can test that can have really, really big differences. So the first is shipping, and we talked about shipping in the previous point, but that very much pertains to shipping rates. So this is your sort of consumer shipping options. And what you can do with testing your shipping is, first of all, testing your shipping charges. Um, does it decrease or increase sales to start moving around what your sort of basic standard shipping charges? Also having the sort of order level that incurs free shipping. And there seems to be massive variation across both the UK and the US. I've been doing a lot of I say I was doing market research. In reality, I was online shopping earlier this week on some American sites who are now luckily for me, shipping into the UK. And there seems to be mass variation, people offering free shipping at anywhere from the £20, $20 up to £100, $100. Just a massive variation. And this is something where you need to know your numbers in terms of the profit margins on a typical order. You need to know what your shipping actually costs you, etc. Because with all this testing, you still need to be able to make money from it. But it is worth tweaking. I personally did a bit of an experiment because we were getting overwhelmed here anyway, and I put our shipping up over the whole Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and in some of the sites that were offering free shipping, it got turned back on, so we were charging shipping. It didn't dent sales at all. And for us, it meant that because of our average order value, we were making anywhere between 10 and 25% more profit on every single order by just charging for shipping. So again, simple, easy wins. Other things that can really sort of affect your overall profitability are things to do with your actual product pricing. Now, this can be difficult if you are, I know we've got Sam on the call who's selling products in the horse industry where they are, you're selling against a lot of other stores who are selling the same product from a manufacturer, and it can be difficult to have that much control over your pricing because you've got a sort of manufacturer suggested sort of retail price and then what your kind of competitors are selling. So it's certainly very difficult to sell above. With someone like Kirsten, who has manufactures her own products, she's in complete control of her pricing strategy. Other things to do with, well, sort of to do with pricing are upsells and downsells. So what am I talking about here? So upsells would be either encouraging people to upgrade their product. So if someone was looking for a digital camera, you might be encouraging them to buy the next model up, spend another £75 and you will get all these extra features. It could be also selling products to a company. So again, our digital camera, a good example would be selling the batteries that go with it. If you're selling jewelry, it would be things like if someone's buying a bracelet, you might want to encourage them to also buy a matching necklace. We've then got downsells. So downsells is selling a cheaper option, and these are they're less common, and this would typically be in a more a sort of slightly more sophisticated sales cycle. It's not impossible to do tech-wise for small businesses, but it's not quite often as easy as putting up sales. And it might be that you can tell that someone's been browsing or they've looked at a certain product or even added to cart and not purchased. And sometimes that might be because of price. So you can offer them the sort of next option down. So just as we were saying about digital cameras having kind of good, better, best, if they're looking at the best, you could offer them the sort of better, the sort of middle of the road, or even a real sort of budget option. Um, and also, actually, again, this can work well with brands. So, whereas you might have a sort of a premium brand, the supermarkets are the kind of kings of this, where they would have premium brand, middle of the road brand, and then they will quite often have a supermarket owned brand. So, selling identical products but under three different sort of packaging stroke branding. So, it might be that for people who can't afford the sort of big branded ones, you can offer under your own sort of steam. Other sort of product related promos to try, things like bog off, buy one get one free, buy two get one free, all the classics, but the majority of shopping cart software providers out there can accommodate these. It's definitely worth testing with. If you're sat on some dead stock after the Christmas period, using them in sort of creative product pricing, it can be really good to experiment rather than just putting it on a really deep discount and slash and burn. You can use it to sort of test out some of these ideas. So has anyone got any questions related to experimenting before I kick on? So Kirsten's asking, what platforms does everyone use? Um, So I've used quite a few different ones personally over the years. At the moment, my favourite is Shopify. Sometimes it's very much personal preference. Karine was saying that she hates Shopify. The reason why I like it is it's a very stable platform. Even being a complete geek, it is hard work maintaining the server side of an e-commerce website, and there's nothing worse than managing to crash your site because you've sent too much traffic to it. And again, WooCommerce can be, again, WordPress and WooCommerce are really powerful. The one thing I feel about that is it requires a bit more technical knowledge. So WordPress is massively powerful, but it's perhaps not quite as user friendly as Shopify. And so, because I'm saying you might also like in the product page. Um, I tell you what, Kirsten, I will go and have a look through my notes on that question for you, because there will certainly be, the one advantage of WordPress and then WooCommerce, which is a WordPress sort of e-commerce plugin, is that they are now so widely used that there are the kind of plugins and workarounds for almost anything. So let me get back to you about that. Great. Well, we're almost at the end here because I said I'd try and get us all finished pretty much at 9, unless wants to kind of hang around for a couple more minutes for a bit more Q&A. But just before I sort of wrap things up, I do want to mention you've seen Emma and Denise are both on the call tonight, and we've been putting together something new called the Winners Enclosure. And for me, I think this is massively relevant for e-commerce business owners for several reasons. So the Winners Enclosure is it's a 12-month mastermind program designed to really help people grow their businesses. And one of the main problems with e-commerce is that, well, two actually. A, that it's a very lonely business to be in, because you are by nature working, it's not sort of customer facing quite the same way. It's not like being in a busy retail store, and neither is it where you're doing perhaps businesses where you're doing lots of networking or you're going out to meet clients. So it can feel quite isolating. Um, and so it's great to be amongst like-minded business owners. So it's not e-commerce specific. There's a real mix of businesses signed up, but you can kind of talk about things in a sort of private sort of and kind of secure area, but it's also very much about the number side, which part of the reason why I got really serious about tracking my numbers is the sort of Denise's influence and having worked through her programs. I stupidly didn't work with her one-on-one last year, and I'm sure I would have seen way better results if I had. But it is really fundamental. So some of the questions, where if we go right back to our slide here, which is about the big three: knowing your daily sales, knowing your conversion rate, knowing your number of orders. So you can know what you're actually getting right now, but how do you know what's realistic for what you should be getting perhaps in March, and then in May, and then in August, and then in November, the big month for e-commerce generally. Um, and it doesn't have to be a case that you sit there and sort of pray that you're going to hit these sales targets. You need a very detailed financial plan and then a marketing plan to go with it. And danger, which is a lot of sort of advice that floats around on the internet, is designed very much for you can't go on Facebook for more than 5 minutes without getting smacked in the face with a sort of life stroke business coach. And I know personally that selling services is far easier from a sort of cash flow management point of view than having a warehouse and staff that all cost money, whether there's any orders coming in through the door, having inventory, having to place big forward orders, etc. It can be quite a scary place, and having a really detailed financial plan is the first step, even before you transition into the marketing side of things. So I'm not really going to talk much more about that, but if you are interested, there's a prospectus that gives a lot more information about the mastermind, and all you need to do is go to bit.ly winners enclosure, and you can download it and sort of read it at your leisure. So there's no hard sell there. And the really kind of final thing I want to say is, first of all, thank you so much for coming, especially with this all having to be rescheduled after internet problems. But really, first of all, if you've got any questions, I can stay on the line for another 5 minutes before I hop on to prepping for the next webinar. By all means, email me, Kirsten. I will find out for you about that and follow up. And please come and like my new Facebook page, because as of next week, there's going to be loads of e-commerce content being pumped out. So I sort of alluded to the next webinar. So if you've not heard about that, so Emma, Denise, and I will be live from 9:30, and that'll be 3 steps to getting the business you want in 2016. So it's a nice complement to this one. It's much more about the kind of strategy. It's not necessarily e-commerce specific, but it's a good one to be on. So if you can stomach a second webinar of the night, then I'll put the link in the chat box. But otherwise, thank you so much for kind of joining me this evening. And if you've got any questions, just fire away for the next couple of minutes. Corinne says 1 webinar a day. Well, you're excused because you're not well. So I've recorded this as well. So I will get a recording over to you guys, and I'm sure we can sort you out one for later on. In fact, actually, the webinar also runs on Tuesday, so I'm not sure if Denise and Emma can remind me what time Tuesday's webinar is. So that's the 3 steps to the business you want. So Kirsten's saying, what's your most effective way of getting traffic? Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, tough one to answer in a couple of questions. So again, to me, most important thing to do is define most effective. Undoubtedly, the most effective way of getting traffic is paying for it, but you need to be able to do that in a profitable, sustainable manner. And if you're in a startup mode, then I'm also, I'm a realistic person here. That, you might not be saying I have a $20,000 a month online budget. So would you like me to talk more about free or paid traffic right now? And yeah, it is a killer question. Paid traffic, right. So excuse me, the 2 biggies of paid traffic are undoubtedly Facebook and Google. And everyone is obsessed with Facebook at the moment and seems to have forgotten a little bit about Google. And I want to really quickly say, to me, what the difference is between the 2 of them. People on Google very much in a problem-solving mode. So we had Monday of this week was the busiest day of the year for divorce lawyers in both the US and the UK. because I think people obviously were fed up of their sisters after spending a fortnight with them over the Christmas period. And if you're deciding that you really want to get a divorce, you know you need a divorce lawyer, and you're not going to be sort of hanging around on Facebook hoping that you randomly see an advert for a Facebook lawyer, for a divorce lawyer pop up. You go to Google and you just type in divorce lawyer Bristol, divorce lawyer New York, divorce lawyer Minnesota. So people are on Google with very much a problem-solving mindset. So if you've got a product that solves a problem, then Google can be a great place to hang out. I would suggest that with yours, there are this both problems and benefits. So it's selling it from both positive and a negative way. So you might find that on Google, people are searching perhaps for something like, how do I breastfeed discreetly? And you've there got a great solution to that problem. When I talked in the experiment side about retargeting, Facebook is great for that. So perhaps someone has typed in a specific query and they've come to visit your website, but for whatever reason they've not purchased the product there and then. You then follow up by discreetly stalking them via Facebook and showing them adverts. And there's so much then complexity between the two of them. And we're actually doing a blab on Monday night at 9 p.m, which I haven't even set the link up for yet because we're having such a crazy day, which is all about generating traffic. But I would say for you, if you're trying to bump up sales quickly and you've got the budget, then I would advertise on Google, so that's Google AdWords, and also on Facebook. Now, free, I would imagine that we've talked about some of the options here. You've got Pinterest, and you can pay for Pinterest ads, but Pinterest is also still a great free platform. Instagram, and the other, which I've not talked about at all, but again is sort of influencer marketing. So reaching out to bloggers, and certainly within the sort of parenting, it's one of the biggest blogging sectors on the web, and it's the kind of difficulty of the free stuff is that while it seems free on the surface, it requires normally quite a lot of time. So it's really a question, and this is something that that you know far better than me, how your day is stacking up at the moment, and also where the kind of financial resources are. I'd say if you're trying to decide what to do, focus on one or two things to master. Certainly for January, don't try and be setting up Facebook ad campaigns, learning Google AdWords, reaching out to bloggers, doing stuff on Pinterest all by yourself, or you'll be absolutely completely in a heap by the end of the month. If there is the budget to outsource some of it to professionals, then that can be a great way to get sort of Facebook and the Google advertising covered. But again, I still think you need to know a little bit of basics of it, and Facebook ads can be amazing for the amount of data they help you generate to know more about your customers. But yeah, actually, there's a great point as well, because the product samples that you're handing out to bloggers, those are not a sort of cost-free sort of thing to be dishing out left, right, and centre. So if I had to, for me personally, if you had to give me only one thing to run my e-commerce businesses with, I'd stick with Google Shopping ads, because at the moment those generate the biggest return on investment to cold traffic. But again, with the experimenting, I like having a lot of different traffic sources. There's something Denise typed into the chat box earlier on when we were talking about payment processors, and she said she's got PayPal, but she's got Stripe there as a backup. The danger of all these wonderful things, Facebook, Google, Instagram, etc., is you're on their playground. I have a huge amount of friends in the digital marketing industry, and a huge percentage of them have had at some point big problems with getting sort of fairly cursory sort of ad bans. I mean, just last week I have some videos flagged up on a new YouTube channel, and they just suspended them. Boom, there goes your YouTube channel. Luckily, sort of, it only took 48 hours to get it all sorted out, and I think it was a sort of computer flag, and then once I'd asked them to manually review, there was no problem at all. These weren't racy videos, by the way, these were recordings of Blab. So, so you can be, if you're relying totally on Facebook for all your traffic and you suddenly, for whatever reason, get your Facebook ad account banned, you're kind of in deep doo-doo. So Kirsten saying, I'll look into Google more, never done it. Um, do you think ads for products specifically on Facebook? This is very much getting into traffic temperature. And again, it's not something I've got time to go into in any depth, but the bad news is really you need to be doing all of them. And an ad for a blog post is great for someone who's never come across your product at all. And the ideal would be to sort of lure them in. They perhaps come across a blog post, start finding out a bit more about your company, perhaps see an advert for a separate but related blog post, and then start seeing, the adverts that are very much related to the product. So it's a kind of slowly. It's a little bit like dating. You need to build that relationship. First date, second date, and third date, you go for it. That's my polite version. So, um, I've got a mind map that I drew out to explain to a client. I think if I can remove anything that's specific to them, I will. I'll try and scan it in and ping it over to you, because I was trying to explain to them the sort of advertising life cycle, and in the end decided the easiest way to do it was pull out a giant bit of paper and scribble away on it. So I'll dig that out and see if I can just remove anything confidential and ping it over. I think that's about all I've got time for tonight. But it's been really good fun, and I hope you guys have learned from it. And so a super, super quick recap of your New Year's resolutions, which I hope you'll get at least one of them done by the end of the month. So number one is knowing your numbers and going through our big three. So you know what these are. So even if you don't know what they should be yet, which is very much a question Kirsten was asking, and is one of the things we'll be talking about slightly in the next webinar. So never mind what they should be. Do you know what they were yesterday? And tomorrow morning, if I asked you, do you know what you did today? So before you start planning world domination, where are you right now? Second bit of homework to do is go and look in your PayPal account and see if you qualify for better rates. And if you're using people apart from PayPal, then go and have a word and negotiate your way through like Harvey Specter, and then do exactly the same with your shipping. So start of the year is quite often when most of the couriers try and pass on cheeky little price increases to you. So they might be sending you new rate cards anyway. So it's a great time to go back and negotiate. And then my third point is get into an experimenting sort of frame of mind. So I'd love it if you tried out one new thing in January across anything that we've mentioned. Whether you say that you're going to go on Pinterest and spend 15 minutes a day popping some pins, you're going to try Instagram ads for the first time, or you're going to experiment a little bit with the shipping pricing. Pick one thing, get it done by the end of the month, and let me know how you're going. If you've got any questions about what we've covered today, you can find me here, and might see some of you on the next webinar. Thanks very much, guys.